Okay, let's unpack this. You brought us some really potent material today.
That certainly captures a moment of, well, extreme volatility.
Absolutely. Picture this. Breaking news. A ceasefire. Brokered against, pretty tough odds.
And with a very high-profile, maybe unexpected figure involved, former President Trump.
Exactly. So there's this glimmer of hope, maybe, relief. And then almost instantly it's just shattered.
Yeah.
That's the dizzying reality here in these sources. And it leads us straight to Trump's very unfiltered reaction.
Quite a reaction.
So today we're doing a deep dive into this flashpoint, the ceasefire collapse, Trump's fiery response, and what it all suggests about, well, the prospects for peace right now.
It's a complex picture.
So the scene was set, right? A truce just agreed upon. And the big factor making headlines was Trump's direct involvement.
Which itself raised eyebrows, given his post-presidency status. It added a whole other layer.
Right. So there was this moment. Tentative optimism, maybe, but here's where it gets really kind of shocking. This truce, despite all that high-profile brokering, it didn't last days, not even really hours. It seems it evaporated, just like that.
Almost immediately, following fresh missile strikes.
Instantly.
What's fascinating, I think, is just how quickly the ground shifted. It sort of defied everything that was hoped for.
Totally.
You had this agreement, looked solid, high-profile backing, and then, boom, undone.
Yeah.
This immediate breakdown, especially with such a surprising intervention involved, it doesn't just show fragility, does it?
No, it feels like more than that.
It reveals maybe a fundamental issue, perhaps, assuming top-down diplomacy can just switch off these really deep-seated immediate triggers on the ground.
Like flicking a switch that isn't connected.
Kind of, yeah. It suggests maybe even these big, unexpected interventions might just be, well, pouring fuel on an already burning fire.
And the fire spread, didn't it? Not just on the ground, but into the public square with Trump's statement.
Oh, absolutely.
He didn't just, express concern. He unleashed this incredibly blunt rebuke, slamming both sides, Israel and Iran.
Accusing them of recklessness.
Total recklessness. He literally said, quote, "They don't know what the hell they're doing."
And that kind of language from a former U.S. president, well, it definitely stunned political observers, no question.
You can imagine.
When someone like that speaks out so directly, so unvarnished, it immediately adds this intense new pressure.
Right.
It really reshaped the whole dynamic of the conflict, didn't it? It forced them not just to think about de-escalating, but also to deal with this very public, almost unprecedented condemnation.
It certainly amplified the volatility.
In a way few could have seen coming.
So let's look at the specifics that reportedly broke the truce. Israel apparently hit a radar site near Tehran.
A strategic target.
Exactly. And as you're listening, hitting a radar site, that's not just a random shot. It's about targeting eyes and ears, surveillance, defense capabilities.
It signals a different level of engagement, beyond simple tit-for-tat, perhaps.
Right. Meanwhile, Iran denied any provocation from their side. And then Trump weighs in again with a very direct warning.
Calling on Israel to pull back.
Yeah, pull back its pilots, stop all further attacks. He cautioned pretty strongly that more strikes could just spiral completely out of control.
And that's the fear, isn't it, that spiral? Because the atmosphere described now is, well, it's just thick with tension. Fresh attacks, sirens, threats flying back and forth.
Peace feels a long way off.
It really does. And it raises a really important question, I think. What does this level of immediate volatility, where a deal collapses in moments, actually tell us about modern diplomacy?
Good question.
Are the old tools just less effective now? Or is it that the realities on the ground, the immediate triggers, are just more powerful than any top-level agreement can contain?
So wrapping up the sequence here, you had this ceasefire moment backed by a major, albeit controversial figure.
Collapsed almost before the ink was dry.
Exactly. Leading to this cascade of pointed condemnations and escalating actions. The pressure to de-escalate is definitely there. It's mounting.
But the situation is just so fluid, changing constantly.
By the hour, really.
And if we try to connect this to the bigger picture, maybe something for you, the listener, to consider is this. How does the immediate, very public failure of a brokered deal like this,
especially one with that kind of high-profile involvement,
exactly, how does that reshape our understanding of what's actually possible in international peace efforts today? It really challenges the whole playbook, doesn't it?
It certainly makes you question the standard approaches.
How can stability even be achieved in such a complex, fast-moving environment?
So what is this deep dive, based on the material you've shared, what does it really show you as someone trying to stay informed?
Well, I think
It seems like a stark reminder, maybe, that in today's world, a single sharp intervention, especially from an unexpected place, can just dramatically reshape things.
it's better or worse.
Right. And often, maybe it amplifies the volatility instead of calming it down. It's not just about the speed of events anymore.
No, it's also about the unpredictable impact, the resonance of individual powerful voices on that global stage. Something to keep watching for sure. You know, sometimes a single headline just lands, and boom, it sends these massive shockwaves right across the globe. It impacts everything, really. Financial markets, sure, but even like the price you pay for gas.
Right.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today, how this recent Israel-Iran ceasefire just dramatically shifted oil prices, changed the thinking on inflation risk, and really rippled through all the financial market.
Yeah, quite the event.
And we've looked at a pretty wide range of sources here. Got the big financial names, you know, Reuters, Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, but also international views like the Times of India, which really helps paint that global picture.
It does. And our mission really is to figure out why. Why did this ceasefire cause such a fast and widespread financial reaction?
Okay.
It gives us some real insight into how tightly linked, geopolitics and global economics actually are.
Right. Let's unpack that. So the trigger was President Trump's announcement. Israel agrees to a ceasefire with Iran. Markets react like that. But why this time? I mean, we've seen diplomatic moves before, haven't we? Ones that didn't quite spark this kind of firestorm in the markets.
That's a really good question. And what's key here isn't just the news itself. It's how fast the idea of risk, the perception of it, just evaporated. See, for months, tensions had baked this geopolitical risk premium into oil prices.
Right, like an extra cost for potential trouble.
Exactly. An extra cost built in because everyone feared supply disruptions from the Middle East if things escalated. So when that announcement came out,
Coof.
it was like the entire global market just breathed this huge sigh of relief. Gone.
Wow, okay.
And the direct hit on oil markets. Astonishingly fast. Brent crude, that's the main international benchmark.
Yeah.
It dropped sharply, about 6%. Settled down around, $66 to $69 a barrel.
Which is way down from where it was.
Oh, yeah. Just before, it was hitting 5-month highs over 78 tires. So this was immediate relief, especially for big oil importers, think economies in Asia.
Like India. You mentioned the Times of India.
Precisely. We saw the Indian rupee actually surge because traders anticipated lower fuel costs. That's a tangible benefit, for everyday people there, too.
And it didn't stop at oil, did it? These ripples spread out.
Not at all.
We saw it in the broader markets. U.S. stocks, the S&P 500, NASDAQ, the Dow, they all rallied, jumped about 1%.
A solid jump.
And not just stocks. Currencies moved, too, right? The U.S. dollar actually weakened a bit.
It did. While Asian and European currencies gained some ground, it reflected this sort of improved economic outlook, maybe a bit more optimism outside the U.S. suddenly.
Okay, so connect the dots for us. Oil prices down, stocks up, dollar down. How does this link to, say, interest rates? Central banks must be watching this closely.
Oh, absolutely. This is where it gets really interesting for policy. Lower oil prices mean less pressure on inflation.
Instantly.
Okay.
Breathing room.
Exactly. Crucial breathing room for central banks.
Yeah.
Because it directly helps cool those inflation risks everyone's been worried about. We even heard some Fed officials hinting at possible rate cuts maybe coming sooner.
Because the inflation threat eased a bit.
Precisely. And traders.
Yeah.
They saw this reduced risk and just yanked that geopolitical risk premium right back out of the market, the one that had been keeping prices artificially high.
Right.
It's such a clear example of how market sentiment, really driven by these big geopolitical stories, can shape economic reality almost overnight.
So bottom line, cheaper fuel helps cool inflation. Does that mean it significantly boosts the chances of those rate cuts everyone keeps talking about?
I'd say it definitely nudges things in that direction.
Yeah.
It eases the pressure cooker for central banks.
Okay.
And those rate cuts, if they happen, affect borrowing costs everywhere. So yeah, to sum it up, the ceasefire kicked off a quick oil sell-off that boosted markets globally. Investor optimism went up.
And if the truce holds?
And if the truce holds, yeah, it really could signal a calmer period for energy prices and maybe for central bank policy, too. It just shows how fast the whole economic landscape can change based on diplomacy.
It really is amazing. one event, and you see the effects ripple through oil, stocks, currencies, even Fed rate predictions. It really shows how interconnected everything is.
It does. Which brings up maybe a question for you listening. Think about this deep connection, geopolitical stability, energy markets, global economic policy. How could understanding these links better help you interpret what happens next?
Yeah.
Even events that seem totally unrelated on the surface. How might they echo through the financial world?
Yeah.
Something to chew on.
Definitely something to think about. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive exploring that fascinating intersection where geopolitics really meets the global economy.
Okay, let's get into it. We're doing a deep dive today on the Summer Davos. That's the World Economic Forum's annual meeting of the new champions, just finished up in Dalian, China. Now, this one's usually focused on, emerging tech, fast-growing companies, the innovators. But our sources, they painted a really different picture this year. The usual optimism, kind of gone. Instead, it felt more like everyone was holding their breath. A sense that the old rules just don't apply anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it's pretty significant, isn't it, for an event that's supposed to be about, new champions and progress. It felt less like a celebration and, frankly, more like a warning signal, a signal about, global fragmentation. So our mission here is really to unpack what happened and, crucially, what this growing uncertainty might mean for you.
Okay, so this uncertainty, this fragmentation, what were the core issues, the fault lines, really? Reading through the notes, 3 things jump out. The global economic slowdown, obviously, those ongoing trade disputes, and just rising geopolitical tension, especially between China and the West. That U.S.-China friction seemed central.
Oh, absolutely central.
And the trust issue. I mean, it wasn't just talk, right? We heard about companies actually refusing data-sharing deals they might have signed just a year ago.
Exactly. That shows it's hitting real business decisions.
And you saw that play out. American firms looking to diversify supply chains, moving away from China where possible.
Definitely. And on the flip side, Chinese companies pushing harder for, self-reliance, especially in tech and energy.
Like tech. That brings up another point. This friction, it wasn't just trade goods, was it?
No, not at all. It goes way deeper. Technology, data control, that was huge. China's pushing this idea of digital sovereignty, basically controlling data within its borders.
Which clashes pretty hard with Western concerns about surveillance, cyber threats, transparency issues.
Precisely. And it's leading towards this, almost a split internet, a bifurcation. Global companies are finding it incredibly tough. They almost need separate tech setups for different regions now. One person we spoke to called it a tech iron curtain. Maybe a bit dramatic, but you get the idea.
Wow. A tech iron curtain.
Yeah. And then you saw these advanced AI applications from Chinese firms, smart cities, facial recognition. But international experts there were asking some tough questions about the ethics, mainly.
Okay, so global tensions, tech divides.
Yeah.
But wasn't there also something about China's own economy adding to the mood?
Oh, absolutely. That was definitely part of the undercurrent. Beijing's facing some serious domestic headwinds. People were talking about weak consumer spending, really high youth unemployment figures. Oh, that's worrying. Plus, the property sector is still struggling, and foreign investment noticeably down from past years.
So even Chinese officials were acknowledging challenges.
They were. They admitted, the road ahead won't be easy, which is quite an admission at a forum like this. Premier Li Qiang gave a speech, stressed multilateralism, open markets, but also drew a clear line. Said China won't accept outside interference in its internal affairs. A standard line, but maybe with more edge this time.
Interesting. And how did others react? Like the Europeans, other Asian countries? Still keen on the market, I assume.
Keen, yes. It's a massive market, hard to ignore, but very cautious. In the private sessions, you heard a lot more concern. Worries about regulatory risks, lack of transparency, those government crackdowns. It made investors nervous.
Okay, one more area. What about the environment? Climate change, usually a big topic at WEF events.
Yeah, interesting you asked that. It was definitely discussed, but with less urgency, it felt like. Compared to previous years, certainly, the focus seemed to be much more squarely on economic recovery, maybe at the expense of climate commitments for now.
So things like green tech investments, which were big last year, less prominent.
Much less prominent on the main stage, often pushed to smaller side events, and the climate NGOs there, they were pretty critical. They felt environmental issues got sidelined, pointed to a slowdown in some cross-border climate projects discussed before.
Okay, so pulling it all together.
Yeah.
What's the big takeaway here?
Look, the overwhelming feeling, the message coming out of this summer Davos, it felt like a pretty stark warning signal. A signal that, global cooperation might be fracturing, new alliances are forming, maybe regional blocs, and the global economy could be heading for a much more fragmented future.
A fragmented future. That sounds pretty challenging. And it raises the question, right? If cooperation is breaking down like this, how does that fragmentation affect our ability to tackle the really big global problems, the ones that need everyone working together, things like future pandemics or meeting climate goals? It definitely gives you something to think about. What stands out? Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're cutting through some of the noise around a really critical U.S. intelligence leak.
Yes, this one's about Iran's nuclear trajectory.
Exactly. And our mission, like always, is to pull out the key nuggets of knowledge for you from this material. Help you get up to speed quickly on something that could, really reshape global security.
Indeed. We want to unpack not just what the leak says, but maybe more importantly, why it matters.
Connecting the dots.
Right, highlighting those moments that make these complex situations a bit clearer for you.
Okay, so let's get into it. This new U.S. intelligence leak, it basically reveals Iran's nuclear program is still moving forward.
Despite everything.
Despite years of pressure, sanctions, even sabotage reports. And what's really striking, I think, from the report is that recent attacks, maybe by Israel or cyber ops, they seem to have had less impact than perhaps previously thought.
Which is fascinating because the assumption was quite different. What's really insightful here is how Iran seems to have kept going.
Right.
The leak suggests their underground sites, Natanz and Fordo, they've been more resilient than maybe intelligence expected.
To cyber attacks, physical attacks.
Exactly. And they're still enriching uranium there. For our listeners, that means boosting the concentration of the key isotope, U-235.
Which you need for power.
Or at higher levels for weapons. It suggests a pretty sophisticated, self-sustaining program, challenges the idea that just external pressure can stop them.
Yeah. So despite all that international effort, they're sort of doubling down on the protected sites.
It looks that way.
And this commitment, this is where it gets really concerning, according to the leak.
Yes.
The report indicates Iran might already have enough enriched uranium for at least one nuclear weapon.
Now, it's crucial, as you say, there's no confirmation they've actually built a bomb.
Right. No bomb confirmed.
But nearing the threshold, that means they have the raw material. It dramatically shortens the timeline if they did decide to build one.
That's the key takeaway there, the shortened timeline.
And this raises another big question, about monitoring.
How do we know what's happening?
Well, the report also says Iran is really limiting access for international inspectors, making it much, much harder to monitor progress or even confirm their claims of peaceful intent.
So less visibility.
Yeah.
At a critical time.
Precisely. That lack of transparency, it fundamentally changes the global calculation.
And you can imagine this leak has caused serious concern. Washington, U.S. allies.
Understandably.
They have to reassess Iran's nuclear timeline now, right?
Yeah.
Potentially shorten it quite a bit.
Yep.
For policymakers, this isn't just abstract concern. It's shifting maybe from containment
to imminent threat management, perhaps?
Yeah, putting pressure on diplomacy, maybe reviving debates about a new deal or even preemption.
And we're already seeing a split among experts on what happens next. Some think this has to lead to more diplomatic pressure. A stronger deal is the only way.
Oh.
Others are warning it might push Israel, maybe even the U.S., closer to considering military action. The idea that diplomacy's run its course. It just underscores the incredibly high stakes for global stability.
Now, Iran, for its part, has consistently denied any secret weapons program.
That's their official stance, yes. Peaceful purposes only. Civilian energy.
But if we connect that to the bigger picture, the details in this leak seem to,
they tell a different story.
Yeah.
It paints a picture of Iran quietly, but deliberately advancing its capabilities.
Almost under the radar.
Yeah.
While attention is elsewhere.
Exactly. It feels like a calculated move, suggesting something more strategic than just, say, a bargaining chip.
And all this is happening while the wider region remains incredibly tense. Iran's strengthening ties with Russia, with China. That could give them economic, maybe military cover, help bypass sanctions.
Potentially, yes. And meanwhile, tensions with Israel are, they're not exactly cooling down.
Still escalating.
This leak could absolutely trigger a new round of escalation, maybe in ways we don't foresee right now.
The implications are just significant.
huge potential to reshape not just the region, but global security alliances' priorities for years.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you listening? Well, for now, all eyes are on Tehran, Washington, Tel Aviv.
Waiting to see the response.
Waiting to see how they react to these revelations. The implications are massive, and as this unfolds, it's going to influence decisions worldwide.
Absolutely. This quiet advancement detailed in the leak, it forces everyone to reevaluate assumptions they've held for a long time.
So as you think about this deep dive, here's a final thought to consider. How might the world's response, or maybe a lack of a decisive response to this quiet advancement, how might that redefine not just stability in the Middle East, but the entire balance of global power in the years ahead?